Shalom from Glasgow. Welcome to Sound the Call, a Jewish journey through COP26. My name is Jakir and Nigel. I'm the CEO of Hazon, and I'm here with my friend, mentor, and partner, Nigel Savage, our founder of Hazon, and two very special guests from Israel. First, Noga Levtzion-Nadan, managing partner at Valley Squared, a responsible investment house in Tel Aviv, and CEO of Greeneye, ESG research company, socially responsible investment, and Mariana Bergovoy, a department director at the Comptroller and Ombudsman's Office of the State of Israel, and one of the authors of a recent report on national climate action taken by the government of Israel. Noga and Mariana, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to be with you here in Glasgow. So we'd love to just start work and then we'll jump into conversation.
Okay, thank you for having me. I'm in the responsible investment field since 16 years ago. That's when I started the journey. First I established my company named Greeneye, that is a research company, an ESG research company. And throughout this 16 years, I tried to convince the Israeli financial institution that is the right thing to do. 3 years ago, I decided that Greeneye is great in order to continue providing the financial world. We should create also a solution impacts of partners. I established Valley Squared, the responsible investment house.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I'm with the State Comptroller's Office, which is the supreme audit institution of the State of Israel. The supreme audit institution makes audits about the governmental activities of all the ministries. And in my division in particular, we do a lot of environmental audits. In the past 2 years, we were pretty busy with doing an environmental extensive 360 Celsius round, all-inclusive report on climate action, and we just published it a few days ago.
Wonderful, thank you. And you know, we were talking earlier about one of the key areas that the Jewish community, and particularly in America, but I think really all around the world, needs to understand in this moment is how the climate crisis is impacting Israel already and will impact Israel moving forward. So we start there. Just tell us about how this impacts the land and the people of Israel.
First of all, Israel is a hot country, we know. So it's definitely more sensitive than other places in the world. And we're already seeing it. We're seeing it in different ways. First of all, the heat. It's getting hotter every summer, and and we see more and more fires. We saw the summer we saw the fire in Jerusalem hills and mountains, and we see it all the time. We see the problems of water and rain that is not spread throughout the winter, but is concentrated in specific days, and then it means that the infrastructure to accumulate the water is not. It can't accumulate the water. So it's just we have a problem with the water that we are managing to save. So I think it's going there, and we are getting there every year. We're finding new ways that climate change affects our life. And I heard just this week that Israel, after Antarctica, that's the next place. The Middle East is the next most sensitive place for climate change. So we're definitely going to be affected.
Well, yes, in fact, the estimations say that by the end of the century, the precipitation we're going to reduce by 24%, and that by 2050, we're going to have a rise in temperatures of 2.6 Celsius, which is way more than anticipated for the rest of the average of global average. And this, of course, is not only for Israel; it's also for the neighboring countries. And this also means that we have geostrategic issues here, because it's going to influence also our neighboring countries, and it can trigger quite a lot of other reactions, and we need to see it as a whole, not just Israel. It's the area where we live in, which is the hotspot, and the influences, not just the physical influences, but what's going to be done as a consequence.
Well, first of all, both of you, thank you for that, and thank you for being with us. Just for people who are listening, first of all, this Controller General's report is a remarkable thing. You can find at least part of it online in English. I was able to be at the Knesset for the launch of it, which was just 5 days before COP. And we're all used to like arguing inside the Jewish community and arguments inside Israel and arguments about Israel. It was an amazing thing, I have to say, to be in the Knesset in a large conference room with several hundred people there, and to publish a report that was criticizing the Israeli government in incredible detail over 660 pages 5 days before COP, and to have an incredibly wide range of MKs, of members of the Knesset, from literally Yamina to Meretz to Hadash, from the right to the pretty far left, all saying how great it was, and all saying how determined they were to effect change. So Mariana, first of all, I just want to say that in English we would say you're an unsung hero, right? Like, you're not famous, but the work that you've done has been incredibly important. That report is almost certainly going to be critical to changing Israel going forward. But I just want to ask you firstly, how did you end up doing this? How did you put the report together? What have you been doing? And then tell us some of the key conclusions.
All right, so just with any other report, we have a neat and orderly plans for conducting audits in all kinds of issues. And the fact of the matter is that we use certain criteria to choose topics what we think are relevant, that our approach to them and our dealing with that could be effective. This is two things that we looked at. That the fact that we also look at is the risks that they pose to the state and how much information we can contribute. And we think in this respect that there were some gaps in knowledge in certain areas, and then we said, okay, let's go into this. And then we did a preliminary evaluation of the theme, and then we presented structure offer for the report. And once it was approved after some sort of a research we did the first stage, then we got the green light in February 2020 to go ahead and continue with the full report on this issue. So yes, the summary of the chapters, which were 4 of them, can be found in the our website and the State Comptroller's Office in English also, and it's comprised of 4 chapters. The first chapter is about mitigations, about the effort of Israel to reduce emissions, and about the process of establishing new targets of reducing emissions for 2030 and 2050 in light of this convention coming up. The second chapter dealt with all the things that need to be done with adaptation, and how are we, if we are prepared for those effects of climate change. The third one was a financial and an economic chapter, dealing with the impacts of the macro on the whole economy and about the stability of the financial system in Israel. And the fourth one dealt with governance issues, about the institutional and the professional and establishment, and what are the core weaknesses that lay behind all those findings, why things don't work. We try to go beneath and find out those core difficulties that prevent us time and time again from reaching those results that we wanted.
And I want to say one of the things that was fascinating about it, and Yakir, I think it's interesting for us in terms of stuff in the American Jewish community. Part of what, as I understand it, the report was saying was the Israeli government has made a series of environmental commitments over different years, but there was never a moment that these things were properly committed to. There was never a moment that they were actually delivered. They weren't properly measured. And in particular, and I was struck by this in American Jewish terms, one of the things that you were saying was that in a way nobody was in charge and nobody had authority to make things happen. That the environmental issues are so complicated that in terms of an Israeli government, you can't deal with it without, so it's a transportation issue, but it's also an energy issue and it's also a finance issue. And none of those departments of the government by itself was able to fix it. And the reason I think it's so interesting is because I think this is a moment, and Yakir, actually, it's a switch, we'll come back, but I'd love you to say a word about this. In a weird way, what's true for the whole state of Israel is also true for UJ Federation or the JCC in Manhattan or any of the complex systems in the American Jewish community. Even you have to move the budget people, the physical building people, the education people, and ultimately it probably needs the CEO and the board to commit to something, to allocate money to it, but then the different departments. Thoughts, comments on that?
Yeah, it's really wonderful to be with you both and to hear about this important work happening in Israel. Certainly a larger and more complex organism and institution than these amazing Jewish organizations that we work with in the States, but it's true. The dynamics are still the same. And I think this report has been authored and published, just reflects Israel's commitment, even if it hasn't gotten there yet, but right, like at least let's learn what the successes and challenges are. And I think that's aligned with a rising consciousness on the CEO level, on the board level, in American Jewish institutions and in institutions generally. I was just in a session at the U.S. Center where high up executives from Amazon, Nike, Hewlett-Packard, and IKEA were all saying, we have already committed to be 100% renewable electricity by 2025, but we have to figure out how to make our entire supply chains. So we're ratcheting up the commitments and we're getting to the implementation, the problems in implementation, because it's not necessarily easy to make a commitment like that. I don't want to downplay. It takes a lot of will to do that. But in Hazon's work with the Hazon Seal, which is a Jewish institutional greening initiative, over 200 institutions thus far. That's a really important step when you get that leadership this week. Yeah, new, right? And then what? How do you really make it happen? And it really speaks to culture change, right? Because you can have that top level buy-in, but until there's a real, you talk about governance issues, like until there's a real sense of consensus, we're all going to do this together, and at every level of all the task details, right? How to make that work. Do you see a similar sort of dynamic in the finance world? People want to do it, but then how to do it?
I think it's very much like the financial system. First of all, in all of it, it's always a game between policy and regulation and the private sector. The policy and the regulation has to be there. That's why a report like you just wrote is so important. Because it's important that the government will say, this is what we are asking you, and you are not getting away unless you do it. So that's very important. But then we want the will and the capability of making the change. And I think if we look at abroad, and then we'll speak about Israel, because I think it's interesting to see what happened in the world before because in Israel we're a bit back. If we speak about a bit, no, but we are quite going back in Israel. But if we let's concentrate on the financial world in the financial system in the world, we see that it has to come from the top. The CEO has to be very much involved and to decide that's where we are going. But there is also, they have to understand that they have to put the means in order to make it happen. Things don't happen if you don't invest in them. If you don't give the right people, if you don't have the right professional working on it, the right database that you need, and those things cost money. Database. You can't do responsible investment without investment managers that are trained to integrate. You can't do responsible investment without a champion for responsible investment, and you can't do it without regulation. And if we take it to Israel, I think in Israel we are still lacking in both ways. First of all, the regulator is not really there. He's thinking about it from any, like every couple of months we get a letter that is a draft. It's not a clear sign, a clear saying that that's a clear signal that that's where we're headed. So that's one thing. And another thing is, I think the education and the will is not there yet. We get companies that are saying some kind of speeches, and they speak about it. When the CEO speaks about, he says, "Yeah, we are passionate," but the means are not there. The understanding that we need to invest are all the company has to be very concentrated on creating it. And I think after the COP, we understand that you can't do that. It's not, it's not a nice thing. It's not a nice to have. It's a must have. Companies and investment houses that won't understand the climate change risk won't be here. Because it's, even if the regulator in Israel won't move, we'll be dependent on the world. And I think that's what's so crucial. It's a risk and opportunity. And I think we need to first to ensure that we are understanding the real risk.
Right, to talk about adaptation, mitigation, mitigating the risk, right, and finance, and damage and loss, these big buckets we're talking about here. And it is so much challenge and there's so much opportunity. And to be here, 30,000 of our closest friends, right? There's such a wild experience of being here and walking through that blue zone with all the D hall, with all the pavilions. It's really powerful. And there's so many countries that have just incredible, pavilions and stages and sessions and architecture. It's quite something. No Israel stage in that hall. So I want to ask you two-part question. One is, why do you think that is? And two, if there were to be an Israel stage, what would you put there? What would you want to showcase in this COP26 moment?
Well, let's plan COP27 maybe, because
it's in Egypt.
Yeah.
Maybe I can answer the second half of the question, which is what would I put there?
Yeah.
I think we have now a little bit to start planning our next one, and I think that Israel's competitive advantage could be innovation, even though we're not in there yet. We are an innovating nation. We have a lot of things to offer to the world in this respect, and we don't put enough emphasis on clean tech. We do have the ability to do so, and I think there are some signs showing that the decision makers are willing to make a shift. So if they do, and if the country starts to invest more and put an emphasis on clean tech, we could offer a booth of Israel, a pavilion there with our ability, especially in solar energy, storage, anything that can get us closer to our energy goals, renewable energy goals.
I think we could also show examples of impact investing in Israel. We have different social bonds that were produced, and in the private equity, there are, it's still very small, still minimal, but it's there. And I think we are very proud of Value Squared, of bringing it to the public equity world, the impact idea. So I think in terms of scale, we're very small, and it's not comparable to anything. But at least sometimes when we do it really good. So
No, I want to ask you actually one question. I don't know the answer to this, but there's more than 500 listed stocks in the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, and you're doing ESG investing partly in the States and globally. But I'm interested to know, and conceivably people listening, is there an existing ESG screen on the listed Tel Aviv stocks? And if there is, can you say a word about how you cut that, how you slice it, and how many companies come where?
Okay, so there is Greeneye, the research company I'm heading, that's what we do. We assess companies in terms of their ESG and climate, and their climate issues, and we're doing it now on all the companies that are in the Tel Aviv stock. I think we can divide it to 3 types of companies. The one that disclose and are great, and I wouldn't come with names, so no one, don't look for them. But so first of all, there are really good companies that are not just are really managing the ESG, and also have good sustainable goods and services. So they have really good products. That's the first one. Then we have the companies that are no harm. They're not doing anything. They're not managing yet, and they might have some kind of sustainable goods and services like renewable energy. Some of the renewable energy companies, they're not really managing ESG, but they still have that. And then we have the third part that are the most problematic ones, that are they have negative impact, and we see controversies all the time, like they have events. Here you find a fine, and here they get a fine, here they have a spill, here a worker falls from the roof. So we see, and those companies are the third one. So I think what's interesting is to see how investors will look into it, because Israel is a small market, and it's very challenging for big portfolio managers, for the pension funds, not to invest in some of them. I think what will be much more critical is the engagement, is how they will force them to move. Like, it's such a small market, the pension funds have to have some kind of place to invest. And they need to invest, but they need to give a signal to those companies and say, listen, the game is changing, and you have now a couple of years, and then we're not going to be there if you don't change it.
I'm very struck by 2 things listening to you, but truthfully, it's both, I think, across the whole world. And one of the consequences of that is not just that more people, more institutions, more governments, more companies are taking these things more seriously, but that it requires of all of us more knowledge, more seriousness, more precision, taking things apart. The stuff that you've led at Colston, right, where you've piece by piece looked at, what exactly is our energy usage, and where does it come from, and what can we do? What are our food policies? How do we change that gradually? It's coming down from very high language, it needs a sort of high level commitment. It's then coming down into a certain kind of level of specificity, and it's one of the places where I actually think there are lessons across the American Jewish community from the things you took out. The second thing I just want to say is you made that tripartite division. I just want to note that, to me, in a way, it's very Jewish and it's very human. Ideally, we should do good. If we can't do good, we should at least be parov, don't do bad. And we should each be looking at where we're not part of the solution, where we're part of the problem, and challenging it.
Repenting 3 times a day.
Yeah,
right?
that's
right?
Tshuva.
And I think just to close, and Mariana will ask you to start here. I was talking to different faith leaders, some Hindus, some Christian, just different partners throughout the faith movement here. And I think this is true not just for faith leaders, but everybody. It's not so much do you have hope or don't you have hope. It's what differentiates a bad day from a good day, right? When we're confronting the natural disasters, severe climate events, being here and getting some of the science presentations, and then seeing so many people doing so many things. Sort of a menu of how we might feel on any given day. So I just want to ask you, as you were immersed in this audit report on national climate action, and you do your work. What for you makes some days better than others in this context? Facing this crisis, which for so many people can be overwhelming, can be despair and anxiety and fear. What comes up for you around that?
I think that seeing a little bit of reflecting on the audit and the fact that it has certain points of effectiveness, even if it was going to an audited body and then realizing that a few weeks later he started to doing things that he didn't think he would do before. People don't always see that. The public don't always see that. Sometimes the effectiveness of the audit is behind the screen and not on the front page and not on the day of the publication of the audit. And we saw some nice processes like this in some of the audited bodies, because it was really extensive and we were in dozens and dozens of audited bodies and ministries and other public entities. And there were times, not once, not twice, that basically we saw a shift, change in awareness, and that led sometimes even to taking actions. And then you say, okay, I guess it's moving something, and I think these are the better days. And the fact also that it got a lot of attention, the report, and it was interesting from the public point of view that the public is interested, and this is I think the starting point. If the public doesn't ask, if the public doesn't demand from its elected people, from this parliament and from his decision makers to make a change and to put it into to put this in priority, then it's not going to happen. And this kind of got us a little bit of positive view that people are interested.
And continuing from public awareness, I think that's exactly where I would say the sun is coming out. I think, as I told you, I'm 16 years in the field, where when it was for many years, it was desert, and people would look at me and, what do you want? And I think now the general public and people, definitely the younger ones, are starting to be interested and are asking questions. And we get calls asking, calls that people are calling us and saying, listen, we want to invest impactful in our public equity portfolio. How do we do it? And it was never there. So I think it's really, those calls will change the institution in Israel, because I think if the demand will come, and the demand will be specific to good products, because if not, everything goes. And we'll have always good things, like in everything you have in the market. You have better quality and less quality, but it's fine. That's the market. But I think once the public will ask for it, and I think more and more people are asking it, and it's going back to the Jewish world. It's so connected to the Jewish faith, and it's just we, in order to make this place live available to us, like in order for us to live here, and for our kids and for our grandchildren to live here, we need to change, and we must, and we don't have any options. And I think being here is just, as they say, the race to resilience. We have to race, and we need to run fast.
And another point that we should say in the positive perspective is the collaboration, because it's such a multi-systematic issue and it needs collaboration. We're starting to see a little bit more of that. The summit, of course, the convention is, of course, it's the peak of it, but in Israel we see that as well between ministries, a little bit more collaboration, and even here, us in the controller's office coming over and having a session with other controllers and other supreme audit institutions from other countries, like in Great Britain and so on. we had an opportunity to collaborate in ourselves in a professional forum and discuss about, for example, a little bit of harmonized principles or how to try and do a methodology for auditing around the world, all the supreme audit institutions auditing climate actions and whether governments live up to their obligations, including international obligations like the Paris Agreement and so on, but also in a national level. Do they comply with their own climate laws and other resolutions that they take? So I think the key word is collaboration, and it's an international problem. It can only be dealt with like this way.
What about you, sir? What distinguishes the good days from the hard days?
Well, I was just thinking as we were talking, I was thinking about the work that Hazon has done around sustainable food systems, going back to 2006 and the first food conference, the first CSAs. And one of the things that we've been involved in, as it were, from the ground up, meaning like very like individually, person by person, institution by institution, is talking about where our food comes from and talking, for example, about where our eggs come from, and just explaining about industrial eggs and the difference between a hen that's itself a Frankenstein hen that's in a tiny cage that's producing eggs that are both the consequence of an animal that's lived an awful life, and the eggs are awful and they're lacking in nutrients and stuff. And the difference in price between 6 industrial eggs and 6 eggs from chickens that have lived chicken-like lives and run around outdoors is not huge. And that in Jewish tradition, we understand that learning leads to action, and that learning about where our eggs come from causes us to be like, you know what, I can pay an extra $2 for some good eggs. So fine, we've done that on that scale. And what is amazing here at COP26, and in a whole series of things that are going on at the moment, is in a sense to see that from 30,000 feet up and on a huge scale. Because when one person and one family changes what they eat, it has an impact on me, my spouse, my kids, whatever. But when 10,000 people do that, it impacts a local producer. And when 1 million people do that, it starts to disrupt an industry. And when 100 million people do that, suddenly the people who are producing industrial eggs are discovering that they don't have customers anymore. And the people who are actually supplying healthy eggs are now growing sharply. And so VC money is being invested in them. And so they're able to invest and grow more and more. And that's also then how governments come in, because then there's the question of, and by the way, what legislation do we have about healthy food, and what food are we serving in our schools? And that's how, to me, all of these pieces come together. It's part of the role of faith communities in general, and the Jewish community in particular, that in doing the work that we've all been doing in the last 10 and 20 years, and in hopefully doing so much more of it in the next 10 and 20 years, it's not just that we touch people as individuals and families. It's not just that we impact people as citizens, but it's that we're playing our part in driving national and international societal change. And the last thing, therefore, that I'd say to you is that, there's that whole thing about, is the cup half full or half empty? And we know all the ways that the world is pointed in the wrong direction, and we're alarmed by that, and we should be alarmed by that. But I'm not sure that it always brings out the best in us. And I feel incredibly inspired by this conference, the range of people doing astounding things at so many different levels. And it makes me feel a little bit of hope.
Gamani, really, I think I said to people today, it's impossible to be here and walk around and not be overwhelmed.
And we
but I
need
think
to, I think it's important to remember that it's all in our hands. It's, as you said, it's the food is in our hand, our money. The financial system is using our money. It's no one else's money. It's our money. And I think that's the thing. It's our money. It's in our hand. We just need to be overwhelmed. And
right. It's okay. It's okay. It's natural to be overwhelmed in this moment in history, facing the science. Also, just being here, it's intense and overwhelming. And to actually meet you and hear about your work and see what's happening in Israel and see all these people from all over the world. It's also, I think, impossible not to feel hope. And hope is not meant to be necessarily a science, right? Maybe it's supposed to be something little bit of a faith and something we know about as the Jewish people.
Definitely.
And on that note, really want to thank you, Noga Levtzion-Nadan, managing partner of Value Squared, responsible investment house in Tel Aviv, and CEO of Greeneye Research, ESG Research Company, and Mariana Bergovoy, Department Director at the Comptroller and Ombudsman's Office, and author of the recent report of the National Climate Action report of the government of Israel, and say that just really learned a lot from you. And one thing we've said at the end of all these interviews is that we have in Judaism we have the traveler's prayer, and so a lot of us are traveling. We're still traveling until we find our way home. So not only wishing you both and everyone here sort of safety, but also like we are on quite a journey as a planet, and it's a journey. And so in that sense, in that deeper sense, I want to share the traveler's prayer as we close here. So may it be your will, Creator, that you lead us toward peace, guide our footsteps toward peace, and make us reach our desired destination for life, gladness, and peace. May you rescue us from the hand of every foe, ambush along the way, and from all manner of punishments that assemble to come to earth. May you send blessing in our work and grant us grace, kindness, and mercy in your eyes and in the eyes of all who see us. May you hear the sound of our humble request. Blessed are you, Creator, who hears prayer.
Wow. Amen.
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 It sounds like it was meant for that.
Maybe so. Kenny Ratzon, thank you so much, Mariana. Thank you so much, Noga. Thank you so much, Nigel. See y'all next time on the next Sound the Call, Jewish Journey through COP26. Thanks, everybody.